The Silk Princess. The legend of the secret thread begins 5,000 years ago in China, the ancient Middle Kingdom. The Emperor Huang Ti and his noble Empress Li Tzu had two sons whom the Emperor doted upon. He also had a young daughter, the Princess Qi, whom he hardly noticed. The great emperor, the son of heaven, was a grand figure, regal in his bearing, and he reigned in splendor. Although his riches could afford him any pleasure, he was greatly displeased with his royal garments and had spent years searching for fabric worthy of his nobility. His quest had been unsuccessful until one fine day, in a pleasant corner of the royal gardens, the search came to an end. On this fine afternoon, the Empress and Princess Qi were enjoying the royal gardens. The Empress was sitting in the shade of a mulberry tree, enjoying her afternoon tea. She watched her daughter playing among the spring flowers and did not notice when a cream-colored cocoon fell from the tree above her and landed in her teacup. The little princess, however, did. Qi peered into the teacup and was astonished to see the cocoon unraveling in the hot tea, forming a long, delicate thread. "Oh, mother, look! It's as fine as your hair," she cried, holding up one end of the shimmering thread. The Empress smiled and asked, "Shall we see how long it is?" "Yes," Qi replied, delighted at her mother's proposal. "I know," she shouted. "I will tie this end of the thread around my waist, and you, mother, will hold the cocoon. I shall walk away from you, and we shall see how long this fine thread is. I will go to the end of the gardens, should the thread reach that far." The Empress agreed, for she never imagined the cocoon would unravel to the end of the royal gardens. Qi, anxious to begin the game, kissed her mother goodbye, bowed, and started on her way. Attached to the thread, the little princess glided away from her mother, like a kite on a gentle breeze. She walked past rock formations representing the 5 sacred mountains, beside glistening pools, and continued on, looking back from time to time to see her mother getting smaller and smaller in the distance. Princess Qi had never been away from her mother before, yet she did not hesitate. "I am not afraid at all. This must be a magical thread," she thought as she walked along. After a while, feeling a little sleepy, Qi yawned and stretched out on the cool grass in the shade of an ancient tree and fell into a deep sleep. When she awoke, the little princess looked around in wonder. Unfamiliar trees and plants of every description lined her way. She passed among camellias, magnolias, and beautiful fragrant flowers. She was so taken with the lovely blossoms that she nearly walked right into an enormous spider's web that stretched across her path. "Watch where you're going! Are you trying to destroy my web?" Startled, Qi found herself face to face with an angry, glaring spider. Before she could utter a word, the spider hissed again. "This is my lair. Find your own place to spin your flimsy web." Frightened, the little princess apologized. Bowing deeply, she slowly backed away, then found a safer path through the flowers. Ahead towered the palace entrance, and still the thread had not reached its end. Qi kept going, and soon she passed out of the royal gardens and through the great gates of the palace itself. All the guards at the entrance bowed as the princess walked past them. "I am outside," she shouted. "I'm outside of the royal palace. Even mother has never been this far." Qi looked around in amazement. In the distance she saw the 5 sacred mountains rising into the clouds. As she walked along the wide road leading away from the palace, from time to time, the little princess would touch the shiny thread that tied her to her mother. "This is truly an adventure," she thought to herself. "I have heard wondrous stories at court about the world beyond the palace. Some say there is even a terrible dragon that sleeps under the bridge leading to the 5 sacred mountains. It is said that to cross the bridge, one must be careful not to wake him, for he can hear the faintest footfall. I can be very quiet," the little princess said to herself, "and I would so love to see a dragon." Gradually the road began to rise, at first gently and then steeply, as it wound higher into the mountains. Xiling Qi came to a bridge spanning a deep gorge. "This must be where the dragon sleeps," she thought. It was so silent, only the sound of the wind could be heard. The princess was no longer sure she wanted to see a dragon, but still she was determined to cross the bridge. Carefully, the princess removed her shoes, closed her eyes, and dashed barefoot onto the bridge with the long, shiny thread stretching out behind her. In her haste, the little princess stumbled and dropped one of her wooden shoes onto the bridge. It landed with a crack. The sound echoed off the rocks and filled the gorge. Suddenly she heard a mighty roar, and a huge dragon emerged right behind her. Xiling Qi scooped up her shoe and ran for her life. The beast sprang, its jaws snapping to devour her. But the dragon's huge claws tripped over the shiny thread, sending the monster hurtling into the gorge and onto the rocks below. The terrified princess reached the other side and kept running until the bridge was far behind her. Xiling Qi wandered in the midst of the 5 sacred mountains. She was exhausted from her ordeal and the long climb, and she was also hungry. Darkness was falling, and the little princess decided that she had gone as far as she could go. When she turned to use the thread to guide her home, she saw that it was broken. Now she was lost. The little princess had been searching for the lost thread for hours when she came upon a small hut of bamboo and thatch. She peered inside and saw a very old man sitting at a loom beside a fire. He was weaving a fabric that shimmered and glistened in the firelight. She had never seen anything so beautiful. "I have been waiting for you," the old man said. "Welcome to my humble home, Xiling Qi. You have arrived just in time. I am nearly out of thread." "But how do you know my name?" the little princess asked. "The silkworms sent you," he replied. "They have chosen you to reveal their secret to the emperor. You have brought the thread I need to finish the fabric I have been weaving for him." "Are you one of the mountain gods the ancient stories speak of?" the little princess asked, bowing very low. The old man smiled and said, "Child, your journey has been long. You must be hungry." He offered the princess some hot soup and a bed of straw by the fire. Once she had eaten, Xiling Qi told him all about her adventure with the spider and the ferocious dragon and how she came to be lost. As the old man continued his weaving, he revealed the silkworm's secret and how to transform their cocoons into the precious thread, which he called silk. She listened carefully as he spoke of harvesting the cocoons. His soft voice was like music, and it blended with the constant thrum of the loom like a lullaby. Soon she was fast asleep. When Xiling Qi awoke, it was morning. "It's time for us to leave, little princess," said the old man. "The loom was already packed on his back. The fabric is nearly finished, and you must present it to the emperor." "But my father never speaks to me. Besides, you said it was not yet finished," Xiling Qi said, rubbing the sleep from her eyes. "That will be done on our journey down the mountain," the old weaver replied. "As you gather the thread that leads you home, I will use it to complete the fabric. By the time we reach the royal gardens, the fabric for the emperor's robe will be finished." "But the thread was broken. "How shall we find our way?" asked the little princess. "Oh, you needn't worry, my child," the old man replied. "I know the way to the bridge. There we will find the rest of the thread to lead us to the palace." So off they went, the little princess and the old weaver, down the 5 sacred mountains and to the bridge, where they found the end of the thread and gathered it as they went. From time to time they would stop. While the little princess rested, the old weaver would unpack his loom and continue his work on the silken fabric. At last they passed through the monumental gates of the palace and into the quiet splendor of the royal gardens. They were nearing the end of their journey when they rested for the last time in the shade of the ancient tree. As the afternoon shadows grew longer, the princess dozed off, watching the old man at the loom. When the princess awoke, the old weaver was gone. His loom was gone, and so was the beautiful silk fabric he had woven. They were nowhere to be seen. The thread, however, was still tied around her waist. She quickly began reeling it in as she hurried back to tell her mother all that had happened. The little princess was thrilled to see her mother still sitting under the mulberry tree, holding the cocoon. The empress smiled as her little kite came gliding home. "Did you have a nice nap?" the empress asked Sealing She, for she knew the little girl never missed her afternoon nap. "Oh, mother, there was a huge spider, and an awful dragon under a bridge, and a very old man with a loom," she said excitedly. Sealing She went on to recount the whole adventure. She revealed the silkworm's secret that the old man had shared with her, and described the beautiful bolt of silk that he had woven for the emperor. "My dear, you have had quite an adventure," said the empress. Something in this extraordinary tale stood out. The empress repeated the word silk to herself. Then, looking down at the cocoon she was still holding, she smiled knowingly and summoned the royal weavers. "Follow Princess Sealing She's instructions," she said. "Gather up all the cocoons you can find and weave a fabric worthy of the robe of an emperor." The royal weavers obeyed. They produced a truly magnificent robe as had never been seen before. The emperor, delighted with his beautiful robe, finally noticed his little girl, and he was so very pleased with her and her discovery that he proclaimed that all the finest clothes in the royal court must be made of silk. From that day forward, his daughter, the little Princess Sealing Chi, was known as the Silk Princess and was greatly honored throughout the land. But her wonderful, mysterious, shimmering thread, the great gift of the silkworms, remained a secret, kept by her children and her children's children, and on for thousands of years.